Okay, I think we're going to get going. Welcome everyone to this webinar on driving growth for sustainable construction. Happy Thursday. Glad you could all join us. My name is Gil Yaron. I am the Managing Director of Circular Innovation at Lighthouse, and we're very excited for today's session. I think this is going to be a fantastic discussion. Before we get started, I'd like to just acknowledge that Lighthouse is headquartered on the ancestral and unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We are extremely grateful for being able to work, live, and play here. And we are also very committed to supporting reconciliation through our efforts to bring Indigenous knowledge and values and ways of being into construction and to support Indigenous nations, First Nations, and Indigenous peoples in bringing those their knowledge and their values into how they design, build, and live in their communities. So with that, I'm going to just take a quick moment to introduce you to Lighthouse. Lighthouse is a nonprofit organization. We are based in Vancouver, and our mission is to advance regenerative and circular practices in the built environment that nurture human health and well-being. And so everything we do is focused on advancing sustainable building practices in the built environment. And that's what today's session is all about. So before we get started, I'd like to just poll everyone who's in the room today. We've got a quick poll just to get a sense of who you all are. So if I could get that poll up. There we go. Just take a second to let us know. And I'll just give it a few more seconds, and then we'll get Maria Luna to share back the results. Oh, great. So we've got a really nice cross section in the room today. That's excellent. You can see, yeah, pretty much every sector. That's wonderful. Thank you. So also, I forgot to mention at the outset that this session is being recorded. So just to let you know that these sessions are going to be made available in the future for others who were not able to attend to benefit from the discussion. All right. So one of the things that Lighthouse does is we run an accelerator called Bluprint. Bluprint is basically a space for founders, innovators, industry leaders, and investors to work together to advance sustainable solutions. This program is delivered by Lighthouse and with the partnership and of Spring, who supports us with content for that for the accelerator, and as well we are extremely grateful for the support of Pacifican in funding Bluprint. So before we get into the meat of today's webinar, I just wanted to give an opportunity to introduce you to Spring, and we have Natalie Youssef here from Spring to just share with us a few words about them.
Yeah.
You, Natalie.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Gil. It's really great to be here, and a very big thank you once again to the Lighthouse team for having me today. My name is Natalie Youssef, and I'm a project manager at Spring. A little bit about Spring. We are an accelerator and advisory firm that empowers entrepreneurs, investors, and ecosystem builders to change the world through innovation. And so that's really our mission and North Star. We're very proud that through our advisory support that we've helped over 2,500 entrepreneurs, over 200 impact investors, and we've also helped catalyze more than $80 million in investment till date. So we essentially equip both founders and investors with the knowledge, the networks, and the capital pathways essentially to help them scale. And our team at Spring is super excited to be partnering with Lighthouse on Bluprint. This sector specifically touches almost every climate and sustainability goal that we care about at Spring. And it's really an industry that's really ripe for the kind of innovation and capital access that turns really good ideas to scaled impact. So through Bluprint, Lighthouse definitely brings over 2 decades of deep expertise in sustainable construction here in Canada. And on the other hand, Spring will be bringing in the fundraising and the investment know-how to help these companies translate that into growth. So together, that combination really gives Bluprint founders something quite unique, which is technical credibility on one side, and B, on the other hand, capital strategy as well. So at the end of the day, we really hope to see more capital flowing into the space and founders who can really scale with confidence as well. So I'll keep it brief for now, but thanks once again for having me, and really looking forward to connecting with folks today.
Thanks, Natalie. Yeah, we're very happy to be partnering with Spring and to benefit from the decades of experience and knowledge that you bring to the innovation space. I know that the founders that we're going to be bringing through Bluprint are really going to benefit from that. So thank you. So we are now going to turn to the focus of today's session, which is on building growth in sustainability and construction. And as we step into this, first of all, I'm really excited to be sharing this platform today with three industry experts. I think the conversation we have today is going to be really great and hopefully very informative for everybody. I'll be introducing them in just a second. But before we step into the conversation, I just wanted to provide a little bit of context and talk a little bit about what we mean by sustainable construction and kind of why we're bringing this up now. So sustainability is a very broad term. Some people feel it has, it's full of meaning, and others think it's a meaningless term. But in the context of today's discussion, we really are intentionally setting a kind of a broad framework where we're really exploring anything to do with advancing alternative, environmentally progressive approaches to construction. And that ranges everything anywhere from energy efficiency and decarbonization, tied into new innovative materials, low carbon materials, policy supporting that type of innovation, basically adaptive reuse, deconstruction, anything that touches on reducing the environmental footprint of our built environment. And the reason for this is this is a huge market. It's over $50 billion, estimated to be over $50 billion in North America. Up until recently, at least, there has been a lot of attention being placed on the impact that the built environment is having on climate in terms of carbon emissions, as well as on resource use and waste. So the impact that buildings are having in terms of generating about 1/3 of the waste that is produced in North America. So we want to kind of step back here and take stock in terms of where sustainability is at, and really explore some of the spaces in which we see the greatest potential for growth going forward. So on that note, I would like to introduce you all to our three panelists today and invite our panelists to turn their cameras on. I'd like to welcome Morgan McDonald, who is the Sustainability Director at Ledcor Group, Genevieve Sherman, co-founder and CEO for Concrete Transition Capital, and Sean Keys, the Principal and Strategic Advisor with Keys Advisors. And I've asked each of them to introduce themselves because I think they'll do a much better job at it than I can reading off a page. So Morgan, I'm going to turn it over to you first to say a few words.
Thanks, Gil. Hi, everyone. Yeah, Morgan McDonald, Director of Sustainability, Ledcor. It is a big, diverse company. We work in buildings, but also in heavy civil, transportation. We have tugboats and airplanes and barges and all manner of things. And so sustainability is about both the what we do as a company and what we build for others. And there's a lot of common ground in those two areas and a lot of synergies in them. And then I'll just briefly mention I do a lot of work with nonprofits as well. There's one that's relevant in this space too, called Afine. I'm chair of the board, and Afine works in this space between buildings, climate, and finance. And maybe I'll stop there.
That's great, Morgan. Thanks. Very, very glad that you could make time to be with us today. Geneviève.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to Lighthouse for including me today. It's a very interesting conversation. I am the co-founder and CEO of Concrete Transition Capital. We are a market enablement platform that is wholly dedicated to creating the financial marketplace for investing into cement and concrete decarbonization. Cement and concrete, of course, are one of many building materials, but they are among the most carbon forcing, about 8% of global emissions, and quite historically difficult to actually get capital invested into decarbonizing this particular supply chain. By way of background, I've spent about 15 years in capital markets strategy and loan product development to help get kind of cheaper, better, faster money into net zero construction, buildings, and clean energy infrastructure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Geneviève. Great to have you here today too as well. And Sean.
Thanks, Gil. Thanks to the Lighthouse team for having me. Really excited for this conversation. Also to learn from Geneviève and Morgan, your experience, and really dive into things here. So I run an independent advisory practice focused exclusively on construction innovation, helping founders specifically build their business plans, their go-to-market and growth strategy, and bring a really deep background in modern methods of construction and industrialized prefabrication. By background, I actually spent the first 10 years of my career as a practicing structural engineer and kind of navigated my way through the construction innovation ecosystem in a weird way. After that, I was recruited by the forestry sector here in British Columbia to lead their market development program, which is called Woodworks. There, we thought about innovation at a very high level, focused on education, advancing innovation through policy, market development, and ecosystem building initiatives. From there, I took on most recently a vice president role at a construction technology startup called Intelligent City, where I led commercialization. The company was heavily focused on prefabricated mass timber building systems for housing, and from there really kind of grew into this space and focused on advisory practice, and really excited to be here and explore this conversation.
Awesome. That's great, and I think the audience can now get a sense of the breadth of experience and knowledge that this panel brings, and I think really will lend itself well to a really fulsome discussion. So I think we missed a poll actually that I was going to bring up to get the audience's reaction on sustainability. Can I just get Malou to bring that up, please? And then we'll jump. This will help inform our conversation a bit. So we're asking you, where do you see the greatest potential for growth in sustainable construction practices? We just want to get a sense if the audience is going to feel the same as before, without prejudicing their opinions based on your comments. So if everyone could just take a quick second to answer that poll, and we'll share the results. Maria Luna, when you think you've got the answers there. give it another 5 seconds here and then, oh, here we go. All right, so some interest in adaptive reuse, deconstruction, but a lot in design innovation. Energy efficiency, not as much as I would have thought. Innovative building materials, that seems to be a big one, and nature-based solutions. Okay, great. Oh, and not very much interest in AI or SaaS. That's very interesting. So let's see how that plays out in our conversation today. All right, ladies and gents. My first question to you is sustainability, as I mentioned earlier, captures a very broad range of topics. We kept it intentionally broad, everything from circularity, regenerative design, electrification, resiliency. I can go on a bunch of the things that we had listed there in the pool. From your perspective, to what degree is sustainability being considered in construction today? And if you want to comment on the extent to which that has changed over the last 2 to 3 years, and why, that would be great as well. So, Genevieve, could I start off with you maybe on this one?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I prior to sort of zeroing in or narrowing down on cement and concrete, I have focused on providing debt financing, actually both for the renovation of existing infrastructure and buildings or sort of adaptive reuse, as well as new construction. Going back about 15 years. So have really been able to see a lot of these changes. And for me, it's actually kind of a full circle moment to be focusing on one building material because I started my baby career almost 2 decades ago as a volunteer for the Green Building Council, taking people on tours of things like the Ice Stone factory in Brooklyn. And it was all about materials at that time. And then I think, the industry swung really far into this understanding that energy use and water use in buildings really was like the big nugget in terms of environmental impact. And so there was just this enormous focus on that. And I think that in some ways, in my opinion, has actually peaked. I spent about 5 years at a large pension fund that owned, it's a top 10 owner of commercial real estate assets globally, about $250 billion of buildings. And you see that at the highest levels of institutional real estate, that there's just a very organized focus on energy efficiency, kind of the first fuel, on water resource, on sort of understanding the energy use intensity of buildings per square foot, having, robust metering and data systems and leasing with tenants and just really understanding, and tracking and then improving, hopefully, the footprint of buildings from kind of an operational life cycle. So I think we've really seen that come to kind of its like peak maturity, and capital markets have followed that. We have a lot of different ways of financing energy efficiency or retrofits of buildings to start to like help them chip away at that carbon emissions footprint over time. And has been a lot of innovation in that in Canada, programs that are, centered in the public sector or the private, and a lot of like public-private partnerships, with utilities. I think what's happening now is that we're starting to see that plateau. And so it's like, where do we go from here? Because these are still a massive, there are so many impacts that buildings have. We spend most of our time in them. And so we have to think about where we go from here. So I'm seeing a couple of things. First, there is an emerging interest in materials and embodied carbon. Obviously, building construction is more or less robust in like in emerging markets, and so this is for people that are focused on climate emissions in particular. This is a huge deal because there's still a lot of housing and infrastructure that's going to be built at a large scale in Southeast Asia, in India, on the African continent. But we still need to build actually a lot of housing and health infrastructure and energy infrastructure in the global north. So there's been a real focus now, what I've seen on site level sustainability through whole building LCA and really trying to get data and EPDs and better information and better education all the way up and down the construction value chain to make sure that we really are reducing embodied carbon every time we build. And then part of what I work on, which I would say is bleeding edge, like very new, is really trying to start to line up the supply chains for decarbonized materials to make sure that they're like abundant, cheap, and very visible and available for builders, for engineers, for structural engineers, right? And that comes with quite a bit of a need for education as well.
Right. Great. Morgan, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, great answer. I totally agree. Scope 3 and emissions in the value chain are, you ask what's changed in the last 2 or 3 years. That's definitely on the rise. Interest in understanding it, having the data, figuring out where to make an impact. Maybe not mentioned so far. I would say what's also sort of on the rise would be more interest in local and progressive procurement. And these things can go hand in hand. They often do. But that is becoming either something that we see more interest in it being visible, uh, hitting certain benchmarks to help drive local and business for equity seeking groups. And then I would say also, also on the human side, health and safety and mental health supports for workers and for construction workers. And then ultimately health and safety and occupant comfort and climate resilience for the ultimate occupants of the building. All of these things, sometimes you can find solutions that tick multiple boxes, which is great. But it is a very, as you said at the beginning, Gil, it's a big category, sustainability. It covers a lot of ground, not to mention financial sustainability, right? If solutions aren't affordable, they won't scale. And so in a way, construction has always, sought to be cost effective, safe, deliver quality, durability. These are all other facets of sustainability. And we're loading it up with even more expectations, which is a challenge, right? And this is why we need innovators and we need new products and new ideas to stack all of these expectations and still keep the thing affordable.
Right. Yeah, it's meeting all of those expectations and needs. Uh, yeah, absolutely. Um, I wanted to just, and I'm going to circle back to a couple of these points because I think it's interesting. Some of the comments that you're making are resonate into some of the other questions, and maybe reflect on them a bit further at that point. But just, I also was remiss in telling the audience there is a Q&A button on that you can where you can provide any questions that you have for the panel. We're going to continue the conversation for about another 20 minutes, and then we're going to leave the rest of the time for Q&A. So please put your questions there. And Sean, turn it over to you for your initial thoughts.
Thanks. Lots of great points there as well, kind of setting the stage. On a macro level, I think one thing we've definitely seen a renewed or strengthened interest here in Canada is productivity and the productivity challenge that housing and construction has had for many decades. We build the same way that we've been building for almost 100 years here, and I think you're seeing a renewed emphasis on that in Canada, specifically around modern methods of construction and anything that we can do to increase that efficiency, whether that's offsite solutions, on-site solutions, even software type solutions to become more productive as a sector. Certainly something that is definitely being prioritized through some of these programs. Very difficult to achieve in reality, and I think we can get into some of those challenges. But in terms of how sustainability is kind of viewed within the construction sector, I think one thing I'd like to kind of add to the context and give people to think about is that it very much depends on which market that we're serving, in my view, and how those decision makers, from the builder to the developer, how what they value and what their end consumers value ultimately. I think sustainability has often been led by the public sector simply because, the end consumer of those buildings are the general public, and they do understand the importance of this challenge. I would say, broadly speaking, private development and privately funded housing is much more difficult. It's a profit motive. They're selling to an end consumer in the value chain that is dealing with a housing affordability crisis. Calling in from Greater Vancouver here, we care about how much square footage we get and where the location is, and ultimately what it costs, right? And at the end of the day, I think in those sectors to have real traction, we all love sustainability. We're all here talking about it for a reason, but I think on its own, very rarely is sustainability a value proposition. You have to be very careful about which market that plays in and which one it doesn't. So, I mean, from my experience at Intelligent City, um, our ultimate goal was to decrease costs for our clients on their builds and through productization, through industrialization of the process. And the fact that we were using a more sustainable building material was a cherry on top. It's a nice bonus. So, like Morgan said, I think there are opportunities there for a win-win in some of those sectors. But I think we just have to think about as we develop our products and technology, where it's best suited and how it serves those different market segments in a sophisticated way.
Yeah, and I want to maybe tie some of this back. So it's really interesting that you bring up these other related themes, obviously financial sustainability, but health and safety. And I'm just so we're seeing a depressed market. The CMHC has just come out with their forecast that the market's going to remain soft probably for the next couple of years. We also have, it seems, kind of a refocus on the part of the federal government around expediting work on large projects and affordable modern methods of construction, really focused on affordability and rapid deployment of housing. At the same time, we seem to see a kind of a pullback on discussions around sustainability, or the inclusion of sustainability, particularly when it relates to emissions, at least in Canada. And so I'm wondering kind of where you see the opportunities to insert sustainability into the conversation that's, and the focus areas now. And I am kind of thinking about this discussion around productivity, around health and safety, around other areas, affordability, and how we can tie sustainability into those discourses. So anyone can chime in there.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a weighty topic. I really resonate with Morgan, what you said about affordability. For better or for worse, this has been true, I think, always. This has always resonated with me. We see the best uptake on sustainability like across real estate and construction verticals when it's affordable, and better yet, when it's profitable. And that doesn't have to be for just the developers. There can be a lot of sharing of that risk and reward with tenants, with homeowners, right? With specifiers or like the guys on the ground that are trying maybe a new material for the first time, and they have some risk or liability in doing something new, and so that creates friction. So we like to take this approach of as an investor, we focus a lot actually on like next mile solutions and investing in things early so that they become cheaper in the future. But in the immediate near term, we're so myopically focused on like what makes economic sense today, and let's like, run toward that. And I'll give one example that is in the sector I work in now, which is cement and concrete. There are many what we would consider supplementary cementitious materials. These are things that can be produced at a cost that is lower than cement. and have way fewer environmental harms and emissions. Examples of supplementary cementitious materials that are used today are fly ash, so kind of the legacy byproduct of coal plants, or slag materials that come from steel plants. So these materials are used today, and they're very common in the industry, but they are in short supply, actually, in places like Canada. And so there are other materials and so many incredible innovation companies that are using very low grade feedstocks that are either free or they get paid to do something with them because it's a waste stream, like demolition construction waste or glass or other ceramics that are in our trash. And, we can clean these things, we can grind them, we can mix them with conventional cement sources, and that gets us concrete that really can reduce like serious, meaningful reductions in embodied carbon. And it's cheaper. It just makes economic sense. The challenge is we have to educate a lot of people about like these materials exist. They work. They fall within building codes and standards. Like, here's where you find them. Here's who you call. So I think, really helping our industry to understand that they have tools to deliver sustainability without taking a hit on their profit margin is so, so important. And I think the whole industry did this incredibly successfully around energy efficiency, building design standards and codes, and really changing the way we think about building from the ground up. So when we did that, that was effective because it meant that people had lower electricity bills or building owners had lower operating costs in the long term, and they really responded to that. So I think we have to keep finding those opportunities. And this is not my bailiwick, but I see examples of this in the kind of contractor workforce development, et cetera. We see some developers actually offer to reward their subcontractors for going and finding the solution that is both cheap and sustainable. So we do still have a lot of developers with scope 3 mandates or with just general sustainability mandates. And the really smart ones kind of tell their structural engineers, their general contractors, their architects and designers, help me find the thing that is both cheaper and sustainable. And if we can find that, let's split that savings. You get some, I get some, so that everyone is compensated for going the extra mile and just spending some brain cells thinking about something that they otherwise would just like drive right by.
Yeah, I'd love to have a whole session just to talk about the risk reward on these innovations, the materials, the composite materials that are being created. And yeah, it's fascinating, and kind of the willingness of the sector to try these materials in projects, and how to introduce them. Any other thoughts?
Maybe I'll jump in and just kind of add some thoughts to Genevieve's there. I think she hits on some really important points. Obviously, the political landscape here in Canada has definitely shifted away from sustainability being top of mind, and looking for those win-wins is enormous. And I think that to some extent they are false dichotomies. Sustainability is inherently more expensive. I think it comes with that um, ingrained perception from the market, and we have to work against that as a sector. And there are opportunities there for systems that can do both things. More low carbon concrete, mass timber solutions, advanced prefabrication. Inserting sustainability into the modern methods of construction conversation. Through productization of building systems, we can decrease waste pretty significantly by designing for manufacturing and assembly. I think ultimately it comes down to a de-risking conversation that Genevieve was speaking about. The supply chains for these materials and building systems is not robust. You're talking about scale-up manufacturers, projects that you can count a handful of them as opposed to hundreds, and you have to work through that with your clients and partners. Finding the right general contractors, sharing in that de-risking, figuring out ways even to help your early clients and partners move on if it doesn't end up making sense, and developing that path with them. But ultimately, it's in an industry that, and I think this depends a little bit on how big your ticket is and how big the switching cost is. At Intelligent City, we were about 30% of construction hard costs, big ticket. Startup manufacturer, finding ways to share that risk with our clients and de-risk it for them was immensely important, way more important than sales. But I think ultimately the construction sector has large switching costs. There's a lot of risks. General contractors, developers, they're in the risk mitigation game. We're spending tens or hundreds of millions of dollars on projects over a 6 to 10 year life cycle. And we have to find ways to push innovation on that sector and de-risk it over time. And that's, I think, being really aggressive in distribution. I think as founders, especially in the sustainability space, we fall in love with our products and we think everyone thinks like us. But being aggressive about sales and early distribution is incredibly important in getting into market, improving your technology. The level of burden of proof of being better and being less expensive. Very sophisticated decision makers that we're dealing with in the B2B complex sales world that we find ourselves in construction.
Thanks for that, Sean. Interesting. Morgan, do you have any thoughts before we move on?
Those were great. We can go to the next one.
Okay. Yeah, I think we've covered that one really well.
Yeah.
So I wanted to just chat a little bit about the policy environment and policy signals that in this space. So we're seeing a number of small but significant developments, I'd say, in this policy space. Things like the International Building Code is considering amendments to allow salvaged wood in structural applications. This follows on policy developments in certain U.S. states. And as well, we're looking at Canada's National Building Code amendments to that happening in 2030 that are going to that are considering or addressing resiliency and embodied carbon. And then we also, at the municipal level, we're seeing the introduction of deconstruction bylaws to prioritize and incentivize deconstruction over demolition. Examples like the city of Victoria is one of the leading, I would say, one of the leading bylaws. We also see ordinances throughout the United States with similar focus. So I'm just wondering, in context of these types of, and what you're seeing in the spaces you operate in, where do you see the most significant policy developments related to sustainability in the next few years? And how do you see changes to policy related to sustainability influencing your decision making?
You want me to take that one?
Yeah, why don't you start?
Yeah, so that's a great list. Agree, those are all relevant. And yeah, the embodied carbon one kind of captures a lot of those. I would add to that federally, if you want to bid on a project that's federally funded over 25 million, you need, as a contractor or supplier, to commit to joining Canada's Net Zero Challenge or something equivalent, which is a corporate commitment to net zero by 2050, meaningful interim targets, deep commitment and public disclosure around your climate risk strategy and program. This is significant. The whole sector, any large contractor in Canada now is part of that. And so as a cohort, we are all supporting one another to figure out how do we not only change ourselves, but change the system to enable us to be on that path, that trajectory to zero. That is really driving some serious change. I don't know if a lot of people see it, but we're all working really hard and collaboratively to do that. And then another one I would say here in BC, it's been around for a while, but I would say also very effective, the Wood First initiative or Wood First Act requiring public projects to either use wood or at least demonstrate that they looked at it. They did a feasibility study and wood didn't make sense. But mass timber, I would say, very much supported the growth and sophistication of it, people learning how to build with it, the supply chain really supported by that public sector investment. Now, it's made its way into the private sector, and it is firmly entrenched in BC, largely because of that policy choice.
Sean, I know that's your space, one of the spaces you've worked in or worked in. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think policy is pretty fundamental, and BC is a great example for its use of mass timber. I think we've been a massive exporter of wood products forever, and the fundamental question of how can we add more value to that by entering new markets, developing new products. There's a whole ecosystem around wood and mass timber. I'm sure cement, concrete, and various steel have similar, but it has been huge. I mean, groups like Forestry Innovation and Investment, FP Innovations, all these market transformation initiatives have been ultimately pretty important. And just to tie that back to sustainability, I do think we need policy to some extent to help us get over those switching costs. It's a big unpriced externality out there in the market. The carbonization that happens through our buildings. And I think it's excellent at a catalytic level. Like Morgan mentioned, in BC, we've had a lot of success in mass timber, primarily in the public sector. For lots of reasons that we can dive into. I think ultimately most businesses do want to get into private sector in a very clear, rationalized business case. And I think what policy does is that it can allow us to expand the market potential of these products and potentially new paths to innovation. I would say it might be, you don't want to build your entire business around it. Capital players don't necessarily like policy. It's a little bit risky at times, but it can be used to spur things on. Short-term incentives or things like the BC Carbon Step Code, I think, are excellent in terms of pushing the industry slowly over time to make these types of decisions. And you can't look past it. I think at a federal level, enormous building codes are huge in terms of opening new opportunities, new requirements. And then on a municipal level, there still is quite a bit of power. Something done recently in the city of Vancouver, they developed some mass timber building incentives. They saw mass timber wasn't being adopted a lot within private sector residential. So they developed some policy around including additional density for developments within a certain height range to help spur that on as a more sustainable way of building. So very important lever, I think, in terms of market building and early engagement. Excellent. Obviously, most businesses do need to be involved in that conversation. But it is a little bit risky to build around short-term policy changes in terms of attracting capital. So those are my thoughts.
I'll just mention one other short thing because I know, Gil, you probably want to get one more question in or open it up to the group. And I'm seeing great questions come in on the Q&A.
Lots for you, actually.
Yeah. Oh, well, one thing that we talk about a lot internally at Concrete Transition, but with our peers, is this question of policy and are we focused on the building scale or the supply chain? And oftentimes I hear these kind of pitted against one another. And I really always push people, having worked in government relations policy, I've written some of these laws myself. It's never either or. It is both and. Like we need things at the building scale because so much of our value chain works at the building scale. And in construction, we bid everything out. Everything is project by project. We have teams that come around projects. At the same time, certain aspects of building materials and construction, like the supply chains, these are very capital intensive changes sometimes to sort of make sure that we have what we need to come in. And that's on all sides, whether it's materials, energy systems, et cetera. Some of these are more like stair step changes. And a great example of that happening globally right now is the data center boom. and the lack of available firm clean power, right? It's like you cannot just like turn that thing on instantly and go build, all of these data centers, and that's creating big challenges. So when it comes to policy, we always are looking at both. And I am obviously not a policy expert in the Canadian context, but one policy that's happening in the US that is going to get really interesting is what we call buy clean. And this was a policy that was actually set up to establish maximum GWP and water use ceilings for all classes of materials: insulation, glass, steel, cement and concrete, and so on and so forth. And what that did is it kind of forced the supply chains to be on notice that the public sector is going to start measuring all of these things. We're going to start collecting EPDs. But of course, once you measure something, you can monetize it. And so Sean is totally right that a big part of policy is just kind of setting the table for capital markets to see a price signal and kind of move after it. So many of the states within the US that established these buy clean laws, over the past couple of years, they've just been measuring and benchmarking and trying to collect information and like educate the construction trades around like you need EPDs, like you need LCAs, you need to start going in, being in a position to provide a nutrition label that comes when we get back to the building scale. But what that does is it puts the whole supply chain on alert. And the public sector happens to just be a larger demand signal than really anyone. And I have this conversation constantly with the hyperscalers, with big firms like, Prologis or like Ramble or like Skanska. Like all of these firms do touch a lot of buildings, but actually no one builds as much as the public sector between like roads, bridges, schools, hospitals, prisons, it's like they actually do a lot. So these buy clean policies are fascinating, and we have started modeling what the impacts of these will be when they start to ratchet down those maximum thresholds. I think that's the kind of policy that can set a demand signal kind of years in advance that starts pushing everyone toward where they need to be to also deliver at the building scale.
Wow, great, excellent. Okay, well, I got through 3 of the 7 questions that I had planned. Wishful thinking. I mean, we just are scraping the surface here, I can tell. But just another reason to kind of keep revisiting this conversation going forward. But I did want to devote a little time to giving some attention to the questions that our audience has put forward. So I'm just going to present them in the order that they were posted. And yeah, we'll see. Whoever wants to respond, feel free. So the first one is, we do energy cost modeling and site integration of battery energy solutions, decarbonizing the site while producing the cost control and savings as a lever for sustainability. How big a role do we think reducing or eliminating diesel and fossil fuels will play in sustainable construction overall? Anybody want to take that one on?
I'll jump in just quickly so we've got time. Yes, important, relevant. Site emissions are larger than I think a lot of people realize. That information is starting to surface and be socialized. And logistically, it's tricky, as Sean mentioned, these switching costs, doing something differently from what you've done before. So innovation in that space is quite welcome. We've piloted a number of things and continuing to explore new ways of doing it.
Great. This next one's for Genevieve. What is the biggest barrier for educating developers regarding low carbon concrete and or other sustainable materials?
It's a great question. It depends a lot on the developer. Actually, a lot of them are like pretty well educated on this. It's really more down the value stream. It's like structural engineers, general contractors, and subcontractors that require a lot more of the education. And I think what we've seen that's been successful and is kind of emerging on the developer side is using what are called performance-based specifications. This is allowed in the US and Canada. It's actually not in parts of Europe, so that's been like harder there. But instead of having a prescriptive kind of standard for materials, you move toward performance, which allows the developer to say, I need something that performs like cement or that has these strength or durability characteristics, and I care about emissions or water. you go tell me what's out there, right? And so it gives developers options to kind of pick from the solutions that can deliver that like affordability and sustainability at the same time. So some developers need education on performance-based specs, and there's a great paper that was put out called the Low Carbon Construction Task Force. You can like Google this, where they actually provide templates. This was a consortia of think tanks and developers that just say, here's like a building, here's everything that goes into a building, here's how you would set up an Excel document and like put that out with your subs. I think on the subcontractor side, and I'm curious what Morgan would say about this, because again, not my expertise, but I think what I've seen is like there's an enormous amount of education that's needed here, like all the way down the chain to the guys that like really don't make that much money, but have massive liability showing up to a job site and ensuring that everything is being installed or finished correctly and to spec. And that actually requires resourcing. So this is another area we focus on a lot with philanthropy or government and policy is to say, hey, no one's going to pay for that other than you. So invest in educating the workforce and supply chains on this stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, what's that look like for you, Morgan, right? In terms of
Well, yeah, I mean, you nailed it. It's every project is bespoke. It has a unique team, and they're building one thing exactly once. And everyone, you've got often multiple gatekeepers, multiple decision makers that are any one of them can say no. And so it's having that continuity through the whole chain. As you said, Genevieve, it's you miss one step and suddenly your solution is kicked out of the program. So it's about that knowing that that chain exists and having a plan to hit it at every level is the case for all manner of change and innovation in this space. Sustainability is not it's not unique to sustainability. It's just the nature of the industry.
Yeah, that's something that I really would love to spend some more time on at some point is that a lot of these companies very, they don't have a lot of startup capital necessarily, and they're facing an environment that's not primed for them, and yet they have to also do all this education to bring
Yeah.
the sector up, to be ready and willing to kind of try their solutions. It's an extra, definitely an extra burden. Um, okay, going to just move on to one more here, see if we can get one more in before the end here. This one's interesting. I'm attending on behalf of an AI sensor fusion company. Not even sure what that is. That sounds very interesting. We do things like emissions monitoring, public odor reporting, infrastructure protection, etc. Is there room for us in this space? How can we get involved and find partners who may need our subcontracted support? Emissions monitoring, public odor reporting, and infrastructure protection. Does that resonate with anyone? No? All right. I'm going to
Well,
move on.
I mean, if it's material to either uh, a problem with an existing solution or an opportunity with a new solution, to have this data to demonstrate either that you're meeting a regulation or you're meeting a client requirement or a stretch goal of someone, if the data is needed, then then there's space there. Increasingly, this is a data-driven space. It was not for a long time, and everything is now becoming more things are becoming quantified. So, in broad terms, I would say yes, there's always room for more data solutions. Not if, but you got to keep the cost of that down.
Um, Genevieve, there's a few questions directed at you, but I'm going to ask if you might just answer them in the chat because they're
I've been
very.
doing it.
Oh, sweet. Thank you so much. Okay.
You bet.
Great. So I'm going to just focus on one last question that I think is kind of more universal. Regarding digital technologies and innovation, what things specifically around AI are currently seeping into the industry that you see? Anyone have any experience with
I
that?
can I can take a first crack. I think on the design side, there's some pretty obvious and simple applications. Architects, engineers need to figure out how to leverage that to make their own folks and their own drawing process more productive. I was talking to some firms just last week that were fiddling around with having AI go in and change their weather models. Simple things to begin with, door schedules, those types of things. But those are simple, easy applications, things like estimating takeoffs. I'm sure Morgan and his group have been digging in and looking at what that looks like. Um, I think those are easy early opportunities, more on the design and kind of back of house side of things. Um, On site, I think is interesting and to be evolved. I haven't seen yet how it could affect manufacturing or on-site construction quite yet, other than things like monitoring, field reviews, those types of things. But that's how I viewed it. I think there's certainly a lot of productivity enhancement that can happen in the planning process for these projects and monitoring as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's such early days for AI. Right now, it is it's a broad tool. It's like saying, how do spreadsheets help? Well, spreadsheets are everywhere. Has email helped your business? Yeah, enormously. Anyone can use it, and it's how you use it that's going to determine if it's actually an additive value. But certainly, everyone is in all facets of the business taking a look at it, experimenting, seeing how can it help me do my job better.
Genevieve.
I was just going to say for any of you, I'll do a shameless ploy here for there are a lot of people that are interested in concrete. If you go to our website, which is www.concretetransition.com, you can navigate to a tab on market data and what we call the concrete atlas. This is one way in which we are using AI, that we are improving every day. We have created like a digital twin of the cement to concrete supply chain, and we are improving the data in Canada and the US and the UK and in Europe. And we've now put out like a beta version that allows people to query this data bank that we have created and scraped and improved using AI agents. And it allows people to sort of accelerate things like site assessments, understanding what the availability and cost of these materials are in particular regions. For example, helps prime developers to kind of know like who that chain is that they're going to be working with so that they can start to get their arms around the team, making sure that they're going to actually successfully be able to implement something that is lower on the embodied carbon side. So we're using AI all the time. It is fascinating. And I will say we previewed a lot of this data at Climate Week in London. We had some of the large cement companies there. And one of the responses we got was, there are no secrets anymore. Like, so that's something we're excited about, just kind of the opportunities to break through information barriers or information asymmetries in the construction industry, to help people just like arrive at the lower carbon solution quickly and go make progress, go do good work.
That'll be incredible for them. Yeah. Those are the kinds of outcomes we'd love to see from this new technology. That'd be amazing. I've just got 1 minute to thank everyone here. So really, Sean, Genevieve, Morgan, just really appreciate your experience and expertise and willingness to share that with the group. I want to just give another plug for Bluprint. If you are looking for support or companies that are looking for support to scale a sustainable solution in BC and across Canada, please reach out to us. There's a QR code here. You can learn more about the program. And then we are planning to evolve this conversation into an ongoing webinar, podcast, something like that, that we're going to dub the State of Sustainability in Construction, just to share KPI in terms of where different aspects of sustainability are at in the market, and then also bring other wonderful folks together, like our panel today, to kind of provide their thoughts and reflections. So just going to put up another last poll to ask you if you would find this to be of interest to you, and because we're very excited about the ideas. So just if we could quickly bring that up. just a quick, very interested, not interested. Oh, they're not in the right order there, but you get the idea. Should be very interested, interested, not interested. Let's see what we get here. All right, let's share it back just because we're at time here. So, okay, looks like we've got some, well, either interest or very interested. So that's excellent. Very looking forward to bringing that forward to you. And so stay tuned. Again, thanks, Sean, Genevieve, Morgan. Appreciate you so much. Take care,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you very much, Gil.
Have a great
Thanks.
day.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers.